Happy Halloween and welcome to Home Media Minefield Live, where we're saying don't be shower clean this Halloween as we celebrate 60 years of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. So a film that's not only defined a genre, but spawned a franchise and inspired filmmakers for decades to come. So sit back this Halloween. I've got my jack-o'-lanterns here behind me to keep me company, but I am feeling a little bit scared. But the good news is I've got some company for this live stream. So first off, talking about filmmakers, I have with me the mega geek himself, creator and director of the award-winning web series Rebecca Gold. Welcome, Ian David Diaz.
Hello.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm all right. We're in to go.
Good.
Love this film.
Yes, we've worked together many times, and you're always the man that's encouraging me to do these live streams. So I thought to myself, let's get you on the journey as well and see where we go. But I am also really pleased. We've got a special guest that's joining us from the States to talk about this. A man who has some lineage with the Psycho franchise, in so much as he wrote the book Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho, which I must admit I read back in my film school days and is extremely good. He also provided the audio commentary on the recent 4K edition of Psycho that's been released, and I've previously done a review and an unboxing on that release. And he was also the producer of the film Hitchcock. So please welcome American filmmaker, screenwriter, and journalist Stephen Rebello. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello, gents. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Thank you.
I like the by the way. That's very good.
You like that?
Good. Very much.
There you go. Well, I mean, I figured it's Halloween, and obviously we have pumpkin jack-o'-lanterns for Halloween, but it's fair to mention that Psycho itself does have some lineage to John Carpenter's film Halloween, because obviously he named one of the characters after a character in Psycho, and also, of course, it starred Janet Leigh's daughter, Jamie Lee. So there you go. It's sort of relevant, right?
I can go with that. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, it's quite
all true.
It's all true. All true indeed. Well, I thought a good place where we could sort of start off with this is we're all different ages, grew up in different backgrounds and different areas of the country or world, in fact. So I just wondered if we could start by talking about how we as individuals first came across Psycho. If you remember where and when you were when you first saw it and at what level you entered it. So maybe we could start with you, Stephen, on that one.
Oh, sure. Well, I saw Psycho. I was born and raised in Massachusetts in the United States. And there's a very big movie palace in the nearest city called the Durfee Theater, a real movie palace, fading and a little tawdry at that point. But that's where Psycho opened, and I was too young to see it. I was forbidden to see it. And of course, that only made me want to see it more. So I nipped in, and just let me tell you, I have never to this day, and I've been in a lot of movie theaters and a lot of screenings, I've never heard an audience react to a movie quite in that way. Including The Exorcist and Halloween and everything. What made it especially delightful for me, and I stayed to see it twice, was that there were grown-ups that I knew in the audience, and they were reduced to puddles. I could see one of my school teachers ran up the aisle. Others were beside themselves, and that was really empowering for a little kid to, see adults really reduced to screaming, hide under the bed kinds of kids. I loved it. I thought it was, thrilling. I didn't understand a lot about the sexuality. The sensuality was too much for me, or beyond my ken at that point. I caught on quickly, but it was remarkable, and it was like a rite of passage. The other kids that were my peers weren't allowed to see it, and so I actually remember sitting on a big rock in the middle of the field and describing the movie to them, kind of from start to finish, and adding my own embroidery. And I realized later in my life that the embroidery had to do with what Hitchcock was trying to make us see without actually showing us, or what he was trying to make us hear without actually providing that. So it was a really great object lesson as I became a writer and other things, as to the power of film and the power of the moving image. So that's my little tale.
Fantastic. And what about you, Ian?
Well, I first saw Psycho on BBC Two, I think it was, when I was very, very young. And I remember I couldn't sleep. And in those days, Dad used to say, you have to go to sleep. I think we all had to go to sleep at 7 or something like that. I remember I couldn't sleep, and I just went out into the living room, turned the TV on, and Psycho was on. It was on BBC. I think it was on BBC Two. I'm not really sure. And I watched this film, and I couldn't sleep after that. I really couldn't sleep, especially the shower scene and stuff like that. I was watching it like this. I think I was 8 or 6, no, I was 8. I think I was at the time. But as I grew up and obviously wanted to be a filmmaker and stuff like that, and I've watched this multiple times, the thing that gets me about this film is how it was like Hitchcock was always trying to push the boundaries in this film, if you know what I mean. Like from the beginning scene with them in bed, because at that time that was kind of a bit taboo, wasn't it, with her wearing her bra, and that guy, he's like, he's half dressed and stuff, especially the shots that Hitchcock did. And he's always, and I noticed the first scene as well, Hitchcock's always moving the camera. So they had the scene where they're talking and then they kiss and they lie down. I don't know whether it was because Hitchcock didn't want you to see Janet Leigh's bra, or whether he was trying to make it palatable for the people of today. But that's one thing you notice when you get older, when you watch this film, how he was always trying to push the boundaries when it came to sexuality, when it came to the violence, when it came to just fantastic stuff in there. So when I first watched it, I was 8, and then I've watched it multiple times since then. And I think only this last month I watched this version, which is the is it the 60th anniversary? Is it, Keith?
That's correct. Yeah,
60th anniversary, with the bits that were taken out. Originally what Hitchcock wanted us to see. And I can tell you one thing, it still holds up today. It's still an absolutely brilliant movie that filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, should watch, because this is 101 in how to make a fantastic movie. Let's face it.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely it's incredibly layered, and it doesn't matter how many times you see it, you always, kind of notice more. I've realized with it. I mean, for me, I don't know whether you remember this, Ian. My dad, I first became aware of what Psycho was because my dad bought Psycho 3 home on VHS one day to watch, and I was like, what is this? And he said, oh, you're too young for this, but me and Mum are going to watch this because we like the other ones. And I was always kind of somewhat intrigued by that. And then what happened was, I don't know whether you remember, on ITV, we used to have a season of movies called Murder, Mystery, Suspense. Yeah. Well, that's where I saw things like, Spielberg's Duel, which I considered to be sort of Psycho on wheels. And, there were a lot of things I saw for the first time on that. And Psycho was one of them. And I remember at the time thinking it was actually older than it was because it was black and white. This was before I realized that was all intentional. But I was completely gripped by this. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And immediately after that, I watched the sequels on home video, and Psycho's been one of those films that I've loved. And I read your book, Stephen, and listened to your commentary and whatever. And, there were things in your commentary that you told that I didn't know about the film. And it was like, wow, this is amazing. So it is so layered,
It's a great movie.
It's a really interesting experience, because you can, in different times in your life, you can enter this movie from so many different places. I remember, when I saw it, and then my parents saw it after me, we talked about it a lot. And, it's interesting because many people at the time saw it as a grand entertainment, just, the equivalent of a wild ride on a roller coaster. But I think the people who got it even more realized that it was a roller coaster without guardrails.
Yeah.
That Hitchcock was really burning down the house in terms of virtually everything. And that's something, though, he did throughout his career. He was, as you were both saying, he really always pushed sexuality as far as it could go. He told me himself that, his big frustration with that opening scene was that Janet Leigh should not have been wearing a bra, and she should put the bra on later in the scene, but her naked breast should have been rubbing against Gavin's chest, because that's the way young people of that day would have lived.
Yeah.
And so, the thing is, he was always trying to push seduction, push sexuality, but he was always trying to seduce the audience. And that's one of the reasons that there are so many moving camera shots, and so many times he's enveloping you in the scene. He's making you almost in the opening sequence in the hotel. He's almost making you a third partner in what would be a menage a trois, and it's very, very deliberate and conscious. He is also trying to tell you this is not your standard haunted house horror movie. This is a movie about people with frustrations and sexual impulses and needs and desires and anguish and sadness and fears about aging and their jobs, and do their bosses like them? And he's setting up a world that everyone can relate to. I mean, look at the movies that he had done before. He'd done North by Northwest before that, and Vertigo, and these beautiful Technicolor people, impossibly gorgeous looking people. And while we can, lose ourselves in those movies, I think we can relate. Most people can relate to Psycho more. I think it's part of why it stayed so modern, in that they're not really talking about "I love you, I can't have you."
Yeah.
They're talking about stuff like how to make the rent and how to pay alimony. What will happen if I lose my job? And it's, it speaks to modern anxieties then and now. So it's really like a Skinner box of a movie. So
one of the things I really liked about it, though, is the casting. Everyone that was cast in those roles, they all suited their characters. Like the Janet Leigh's boss, he really did look like a brown noser, and he really did look like he needed that guy's money for his company too. So he was willing to do anything to make that work, wasn't he? And the policeman looked really threatening. I mean, I don't know who the actor was, but even I was scared when I was 8 when I saw him lean into the car.
Well,
he had glass on and everything.
Especially so because the crew brought out just a whole array of mustaches, glasses, ears, a different nose, because Hitchcock wanted the actor Mort Mills changed. He said, change him. And, with Hitchcock, you never got anything except, I want something different, so come up with it. And no one ever knew what he wanted. But when he saw those glasses, it was it. And focusing on that kind of, almost terrifying stare behind those glasses was, a masterstroke. I've heard so many, especially women, talk about that moment because, it's frightening to be stopped by a policeman, especially now. And for a woman alone driving with $40,000 in her handbag, it was just a remarkable thing to do.
A lot of money in those days.
Yes,
a lot of money today as well.
A lot of money. But Hitchcock was really astute with casting, and there were many other women considered before Janet Leigh, Lana Turner, and a bunch of other people. He wanted Rock Hudson at one point to play Sam Loomis, and got back at John Gavin, whom he didn't particularly like, by calling him Rock on the set once in a while, aggravating him and unsettling him all the more. But he's pretty brilliant in every way. And while Psycho was shot by his TV crew to save money and to do things quicker, the movie was planned out so beautifully. I mean, you can see it. Every shot is thought out in advance. And so
also it's very simple.
It's very simple.
Yeah, and also he in terms of the casting as well, I mean, he did totally subvert from the expectation, because from what I understand of Robert Bloch's novel, the character of Norman Bates was kind of like a middle-aged, balding, overweight guy, and obviously he goes and casts this young, attractive actor in Anthony Perkins. So again, talking about making that material completely his own and putting his own spin on it, like any good director does.
Well, of course. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, I was just saying that as a director, I recognize a lot of Spielberg in Psycho. So obviously Spielberg was convinced by Psycho, especially the oneers. So you'd have Janet Leigh. Remember that scene where Janet Leigh was packing? She was in a black bra. So, and she's packing, and then you have a shot where she's standing near the wardrobe, and then the camera pans to the bag, and then it pans to the money on the bed. And then as she gets up, it follows her. So it's all in one shot, and I remember Spielberg was saying when he was directing Raiders of the Lost Ark, he wanted to direct it fast like a TV show. And the same thing with Hitchcock. Hitchcock was directing Psycho that way too, wasn't he? Because all the budget came completely, it wasn't as big as North by Northwest. There was a small budget, wasn't it? And look at the wonderful thing he did with this. Simple, very, very simple, but very, very effective, right? As directing wise. So.
Indeed. I just want to jump in, by the way, and just say, obviously, we're having a government announcement here in the UK whilst this is being broadcast. So it's probably affecting some of our viewing figures, but we have got some people watching us currently. A couple have already joined in on the chat, which I appreciate and we recommend. And obviously, if you're watching this in retrospect on YouTube, please do, I have to say these things, but please do give us a like, consider subscribing to the channel, etc. But yes, I'll keep putting comments up as they arrive. Okay, so Stephen, what I want to ask you now is can you sort of talk to us about how you became involved in actually doing the book on the making of this, because it really is a complete study and masterclass in the making of this film and everything that Hitchcock went through to get to that. So can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, thank you for saying that. My relationship with Hitchcock began when I was a little boy. My parents were big movie fans, and they would take me to the drive-in, or I'd sit in the back seat or something like that. So I knew that he was special to them. I would watch the TV show with them, his weekly TV show when I could. And when I was a young man, I decided that I was going to call him on the phone because, as one does. So I actually did call him, and we had a telephone relationship for a while. He took my phone call by accident one time, but he thought I was smart and he liked me, and we had this wonderful little relationship, which was remarkable for a kid living in a kind of in a mill city in southeastern Massachusetts. Anyway, so flash forward, he did a picture called Torn Curtain with Paul Newman and Julie Andrews in the 60s. And I wasn't old enough to drive yet, but a friend was. The world premiere was in Boston, Massachusetts, which was close enough to me. And, there I was. Mr. Hitchcock was there. We talked. He crossed the room to see me. He and his wife invited me to dinner. It keeps going.
Wow.
And later, and then I was the last person to ever interview Mr. Hitchcock before he died. So our paths crossed in many ways. But because I felt like I had a relationship with Psycho in that, it seemed to me one of the first movies that not only kept me up as it did with some other people, but it told me what the power of film was because I felt it. And people had asked me to write a book about Hitchcock, and I thought about entering it in very many ways. And I thought, at the time, Psycho was considered it was a one-off in a way, but it was considered a lesser movie. I think I helped, with part of the renaissance of the movie. But in any case, I was told by many publishers, you're a really good writer. Why don't you do Rear Window? Why don't you do North by Northwest? I mean, Psycho is such a minor film. And I begged to differ, and I paid for it because there was only one publisher who was interested in doing it, the book. But I decided that it was a movie that got under my skin, and you need to write and create things that get under your skin, that trouble your sleep. So I was very lucky in that the Hitchcock family had just given his archive to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Library. So I asked to get in there, but I didn't realize I was going to be the very first person out of the Hitchcock family to touch those papers, to read those documents. And so, to read shooting schedules, to read Janet Leigh isn't feeling well today, to read, those reports. For the time I was writing that book, it felt like the movie was being made just now. And I had to approach it in that way. I had to feel it in that way. And, and then I began to find the people who had been involved with the movie, either in front of the camera or behind the camera. And many of them, I know it's going to sound odd, but I swear to you, this is absolutely true. Many of them were shocked to be asked to talk about Psycho because it wasn't the movie that people talked about. But it was incredible to talk with people who were on the set every day, talking about Hitchcock's habits, how he dressed, his humor, his fears, his anxieties when he was making the movie, because it was a tremendous risk. This is one of the things that people forget. It was a risk for Janet Leigh as a sort of peaches and cream popular movie star, to be in this kind of movie, a horror movie, and a movie in which she would appear vulnerable and naked, and not in the entire movie. Very bold and daring. For Anthony Perkins, it was a tremendous risk. And he talked about it, and he paid for it. He paid severely in many ways for appearing in Psycho and for playing a transvestite. Or, as newspapers of the time said, he played a queer. So they totally missed the boat. But I think that kind of thinking about the character of Norman Bates and some of Mr. Perkins' own reputation for being difficult on the set, which he could be, but which he was not on Psycho, because Hitchcock adored him. I think that he paid for that also in terms of an Oscar nomination, which he did not get. So it was one of the most joyful experiences of my life, my professional life, that is to get into those papers, which smelled, by the way, like arsenic. Because Hitchcock had them in his garage, and they were rats, and so he kept pouring powdered arsenic on them. So if my life is sort of curtailed because of slow burning arsenic poisoning, please blame Mr. Hitchcock. So the book came out, this little book that nobody wanted to publish, and it was on the front page of the entertainment section of the New York Times the weekend it opened, and it got great acclaim. And then It got picked up many, many times by many directors, including Spielberg, by the way, interested in doing a movie version of it. So I feel like I've been talking a really long time, but
no. It's that's really why you're on here.
It's really interesting.
That's sort of my, my interaction with Mr. Hitchcock. And then, to be the very last, I didn't know at the time, but to be the very last person to ever speak to him, professionally, and for that interview to be published. I mean, it was syndicated around the world, and I was instantly a journalist.
Wow.
I was a therapist at the time, literally. Right. I was a therapist.
That's why he liked you.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons. He also, he also told me how he would photograph me, what colors I should always dress in, what angle would be best for me, none of which I'm doing today, which lens he would use. I mean, that's the kind of person he was. And he was the complete filmmaker, and he was the complete educator. He wanted me to know these things. And then ironically, my mentor as a screenwriter was Ernest Lehman, who wrote North by Northwest. I did a story about him. He knew of my relationship and my, interest in Hitchcock. And we nearly did, we did sell it, but Ernie backed out. We actually sold a screenplay that Hitchcock and Ernie were going to do together called Blind Man. But Ernie backed out. He got nervous. But anyway, so the Hitchcock connection goes on, and to this moment in terms of a project that I'm doing right now, not as we're speaking, but right now. So anyway, over to someone else.
Well, Eastland Burkholder there has said, Stephen, keep on talking. I don't know if you can see that. So
you obviously know that I can. So
no,
fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating story there. Absolutely. And of course, a few years ago now, I always found it quite interesting because we had two movies out at the same time that kind of reflected two different sides of Alfred Hitchcock. So we had Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins.
Love that film.
And then we had The Girl, where Toby Jones played Hitchcock. And we had, obviously that focused on the birds and the working relationship with Tippi Hedren. And then Hitchcock focused on the whole making of Psycho and how he and Alma Helen Mirren played Alma, and how they sort of put everything on the line to get that film made. Now, am I correct with this, Stephen? You were a producer on that film. Is that correct?
No, I was not. I was at one point, and then I wasn't. But that has to do with the Producers Guild and all that. That's not an issue. I did write 4 drafts of the screenplay, and many of my scenes are in the movie. But the Writers Guild did not allow credit. There's a thing in the United States. If you're the first name on a screenplay, they're likely not to bump you off. But I was not the first screenwriter. I did rewrites on things. But my version of that movie was quite different in that my version followed them home. So it was not only Alma and Mr. Hitchcock, it was Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. It was Anthony Perkins and some of Tab Hunter. It was John Gavin and his wife. And it was a story about everyone laying it on the line for a movie, and some of that is in the film, and the risks that making that movie presented, and also it dealt with the cost they paid in their personal and professional lives. But I know lots of people like the movie Hitchcock, and I hear from people all the time. It's very gratifying.
What do you think of it, Ian?
I loved it. I loved Anthony Hopkins' performance as Hitchcock. I think it was brilliant. Personally, I mean, halfway through the film, I forgot it was Anthony Hopkins. Which is
unusual, right?
Yeah, it is unusual. I thought it was a great movie. I remember. I think I saw it with you, Keith, at BAFTA. I think it was, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, and there was a Q&A after.
Yeah.
Helen Mirren. Which was great. Yeah. So
it's a great movie.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and it was quite, you know, as fellow geeks, I think you would enjoy the idea of what it was like for me. You know, not only having worked on the screenplay, but walking onto the set or walking to downtown Los Angeles and seeing the street set for 1960 and the marquees and the posters that they reproduced, and the recording session for the intros and outros that were played in theater lobbies. That was a real lot of fun. Also being on the set when Mr. Hopkins was, in a sense, conducting the audience, standing in the lobby, hearing the responses to Psycho.
Yeah.
Scene that did not
great. I really enjoy that film, and you know, it's one of those films that is driven by performance. It's driven by Anthony Hopkins' performance, and as I said, I can't fault him. I actually believed he was Hitchcock. So, but then again, you know Hitchcock better than me, so don't know what you thought of his performance.
Oh well, I thought he was lovely. You know, for me, one of the things that got missed is Hitchcock was terribly funny and terribly bitchy in a wonderful way. I mean, he was even that way with me, and he was like an imp. He was always looking for the fun in something. I mean, the thing that he would say, I'd heard him say often was, well, in terms of making a movie, well, where's the fun in doing it that way?
Yeah.
You know? So when people would, you know, for Norman Bates, for example, suggesting casting, they would suggest, you know, people like Roddy McDowall or Dean Stockwell or you know, Dennis Weaver at one point, and he would say there's no fun. More importantly, there's no surprise. There's no surprise in Roddy McDowall. There's no surprise in either of the Stockwells, but there is a surprise with Perkins, which we don't think of now because in those days, Paramount was selling him as the new James Dean. You know, this looking troubled youth who, you know, was more misunderstood than sinning, or more sinned against than sinning, and you know, kind of a romantic lead. And so casting him was, you know, quite brilliant. Hitchcock saw the darkness. He saw the complexity. He saw the.
I remember him saying that. I can't remember. It was he was talking about one film, and he was saying, "What's the point in casting a villain that looks like a villain?"
Yeah, exactly.
Because if the villain looks like a villain, you can see it coming a mile away. He goes, you cast someone really good looking to play the villain, you'll never see it coming. And that was his thoughts, wasn't it? About it?
Well, you always, I mean, look, there's a reason that, you know, killers like Christie and whoever Jack the Ripper was, and all of that, and there's a reason why Hitchcock would cast Gregory Peck, or do you know what I'm saying? He would, or Novello back in the silent days. It was always someone. You know, it was always someone who was a matinee idol. You know, Hitchcock always used to say, how do you think they attract their victims? It's not by being, you know, they're not twirling their mustaches. They're acting awfully normal, and they're good looking while doing it. So, you know, I mean, it's the same thing with casting women. He didn't want obviously sexual women. He liked, I mean, I think one of the reasons that he liked me and you know, certainly the way he cast things is he liked people that were bright, but he also liked people who kept things in reserve, who didn't put all the cards on the table, who, you know, who suggested that there were undercurrents that were, and that's the thing that he always seized on. That's what excited him. When he didn't like someone on the set, it was usually, there were several reasons. One, they were unprepared. He thought that was unforgivable because he was probably the most prepared director who ever set foot on a soundstage, or at least one of them. Another one was if they were humorless. I'm not going to mention any names, but that's one of the reasons that he didn't get along with certain leading ladies. They just didn't get it. Janet Leigh would tell me all the time. We flew back and forth, on planes for various things that we did together when the book came out, and she was wonderful. But she would say, Hitchcock would say the most obscene things to me before we'd start. But she said he always knew to do it because I was so tight. She was always wringing her hands, always. She was very, very nervous. And so he would, loosen her up by, disarming her by saying something shocking. But her response wasn't to go, oh, how awful. She would laugh uproariously. She knew what he was doing, and she was very grateful for it because, as she said, she started the movie only wanting to please him. And when we want to please people, we can be very uptight and not ourselves. He just wanted her to relax.
He was well beyond his time, though, wasn't he? Hitchcock was doing stuff that we consider, that we're doing today, I guess. So he's well beyond his time.
I've always considered him an experimental filmmaker. I mean, if he was still alive today, he'd be doing things with CGI and 3D, and he did do stuff with 3D in Dial M for Murder, but he'd be using all the tools that were available. And I think what's unique is you think he went right the way from the beginning of cinema, essentially, till he passed. So he worked on silent films, he worked on black and white films, he worked in Technicolor and widescreen and experimented with 3D, did television. I mean, he really did everything, didn't he?
He certainly did. And right to the end of his life, he was experimenting. I mean, when I talked with him, he told me about 2 projects that he wanted to do. And he didn't tell them in terms of character. He told them, at least to me, in terms of visual images and color. We're going to use this palette, and there's going to be a scene where 2 men are chasing each other, and there's rustling wind and long wind rushes, and they're in Sweden. And then another thriller he was going to do was all about color. He had seen Blow Up and Antonioni, and he did not get over it. He just thought. And maybe neither did I, but he just thought he needed to push beyond what he had already done.
Yeah.
And one irony we should talk about, maybe if you guys see it this way, is that one irony about Psycho, about his doing Psycho, was, look, he was trying to get out of a box. He was the director of elegant romantic thrillers. It's Ingrid Bergman. It's Kim Novak. It's Grace Kelly or Cary Grant or James Stewart, and suddenly it wasn't anymore. It was, different. But Psycho so typed him the way it did Anthony Perkins that he was in a new box. He directs scary movies, shocking movies, horror movies. So that helps account for. Psycho was 1960. The Birds was 1963. Marnie was supposed to follow. Psycho, and a beautiful script called No Bail for the Judge with Audrey Hepburn and Lawrence Harvey was supposed to be in the Psycho slot. So he didn't intend for that to happen, but I think he knew that the audience was not, after Psycho, was not going to be satisfied with a romantic thriller. And I think that's part of why he experimented with The Birds.
He was,
brand new trap.
Yeah. As I said, with Psycho, he did take a lot of chances, and as you've said, he took a hell of a lot of chances. But the thing is that I don't know, is this the right thing to say? He kind of reinvented the horror genre with Psycho, in my opinion. I mean, there's some beautiful shots in that movie, fantastic shots. And just to think, right, even when I was watching it, I watched it again yesterday, even the back projection shots, I think is beautiful. Those shots where she's in the car, and she's got thoughts in her head thinking about what people are saying, and you got the deliberate back projection behind you, even black and white. I thought that just looked fantastic. For some reason, when I was watching yesterday, I was thinking, those scenes look fantastic, even though it looks a bit phony. It really does sink into the tone of what he was trying to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, what he kind of did in many respects, and he would admit this in interviews, was he would be very influenced by what foreign filmmakers were doing, whether it was Japan or Europe or wherever, and he would sort of take some of those techniques and put his own spin on it and sort of bring it into the mainstream. And that's where it's that sort of fine line between art and entertainment, isn't it? So which he was very astute at. And you're absolutely right, Ian. I mean, in many respects, many people consider Psycho to be the first slasher film, whether that's a compliment or not. That is a belief that many people have. I mean, do you have thoughts on that, Stephen?
They probably won't be popular. When has that ever bothered me? I think, I don't like categories. That's just me. I don't like horror movie or slasher movie, and it isn't about. I just don't like ghettoizing. I just think a movie, a great movie, is its own thing. It's its own genre. It's its own, it is its own universe, really. And so I understand why people say that, because it's it's journalistic and it's shorthand, and it's a cheap, easy way to communicate. Yeah. I rarely see a quote unquote slasher movies in which the characters and the density of what's going on is so intense, and there are so many layers to deal with, and there's so much. I find Psycho a tremendously sad movie with a bunch of people in their private traps. I don't find a lot of that in horror movies or especially contemporary ones, or slasher movies. So, but I understand why, because people feel that Psycho did kind of open the floodgates for sexuality.
Well, they focused on the wrong things, didn't they? They focused on the violence rather than what. Because if you look at Psycho very carefully, it's a piece of art and it's entertainment as well. You look at those shots that he did in the shower where you got the blood going through the drain, and then you got the shot of the eye, and all that's really beautifully done and so fantastically done. And I don't even know how he did that shot with the eye, and it comes out, and then you see the water drip and stuff. I'm still figuring out how he did that. Maybe it was a still shot.
There's a book about it. There's a book that can tell you.
All right.
I've always thought of Psycho, but not just Psycho, a lot of Hitchcock's films, I kind of look at them as morality tales.
They are, yeah.
And I think that, Psycho is particularly heartbreaking for a number of reasons. And I mean, one of the things, again, that Psycho is, from a filmmaker's perspective and a storyteller's perspective, famous for, is the fact that it broke all of the sort of narrative traditions as well, by having a character that we're following for the film, but then, that character dies midway through, and then we're following another set of characters. And I mean, it's just incredible, really. It's no wonder that we're celebrating it 60 years later,
It's funny that really good movies, right, that the audience don't appreciate when it actually comes out, gets the appreciation years and years later. And Psycho's just one of them. I mean, Psycho now is hailed as one of the best films ever made. Do you know what I mean? And quite rightly so. And look at what Hitchcock did with it. He didn't shoot in color, shot in black and white to keep the tone. He basically shot it very simply. Back projection shots and studio shots mixed with some outside shots, and as Keith rightly says, everybody's in their own trap, and he broke the narrative. Follow one character, she's gone. Follow another character, follow the detective, he's gone. I love that scene. But it's an amazing film. It's an amazing piece of art that belongs in history of filmmaking. It really does. I'm not saying that because I'm trying to be smart. I'm saying that because I actually believe it. I actually
hence why people write books about it, which is but let me ask you, Stevens, there. I mean, again, Eastland's totally agreeing with everything that you've said there, which is good to see. But let me ask you, you mentioned, and I like the way you phrased this, about movies being in their own universe, and I know Ian will agree with this as a filmmaker. We all try and create something and make it authentic within its own universe. But Psycho has also, for good or bad, created its own universe as well. And I just wondered, do you have any thoughts on the sequels, the spin-offs, the sort of extended media that the franchise has generated?
I think that I guess it's because I guess it's because I feel a loyalty, or there's a specificity about Norman Bates and what happens to him in the movie and how the movie ends, that it feels complete to me. I don't know that there is anything else. I don't know if there's anything else to be said. We have come in at a time when a character whose entire identity has been destroyed by a parent is losing control of everything. I don't know how you come back from that. I don't know how you come back from that as a human. I don't know how you come back from that as a character. I don't know how you come back from that as an audience. And so, while I think I've seen some, interesting angles and ideas in the sequels, in the television show, in the shot-for-shot remake, it's like there's a phrase that people use about musicals when they're going to do a musical, and it's like, why does this sing? And sometimes when I've seen those other films, I think, why does this movie exist? I understand, obviously I understand all the reasons why it exists, but just for me, dramatically and humanistically, and in terms of the Bates character and his tragedy, why does it continue? I don't want a sequel to Hamlet. I don't need to know what happened to a lot of characters. So, I think that world will continue to inspire people for years, long after I'm gone. But it's okay if I don't see them. I don't know.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, I have to say, for me, I've got, I guess, just because of when I saw them when I was sort of growing up and whatever. So there's a little bit of almost like a guilty pleasure that I associate with some of the, spin-off material, whether it's sequel, prequel, or reimaginings or whatever. But that only really comes from a place of my love for the original, if that makes sense. And we totally don't need them. I agree. We absolutely don't need them. But, I would be lying if I was here saying, the sequel, they suck and I hated them, because there is something about them that I like. But the way I look at it, they don't take anything away from the amazing original, for me. What about you, Ian?
I liked Psycho too. I mean, it was all right. It wasn't as great as the first one, but I didn't like Psycho 3, and I kind of liked the TV show. It was all right. But I see the TV show as something completely different to the movie. I see it as completely divorced from the movie. If it wasn't called Bates Hotel, if its name wasn't Norman, it wouldn't have made a difference. You know what I mean? So
they were kind of using the popularity of the franchise to do a show that might not have been made otherwise. So what about I know you're an ET fan, Ian. So did you ever see Psycho 4, the beginning, where Henry Thomas plays a young Norman Bates?
I just thought it was not very good, I mean, when you get a director like who directed the second one?
Richard Franklin.
Yeah,
right?
It was okay because you can see he's a good director and he used the camera to a good effect and so he was trying to.
And he was a Hitchcock student as well. So yeah,
the third one and the fourth one, you could tell they just roped people in. It's like who's available? Oh, let's get him. All right, it was like they were just painting by numbers, just doing it for the money. Everybody was just doing it for the money. That's what it felt like to me. I don't know whether that's true.
Were they let Perkins direct the third one?
Yeah,
so that was his directorial debut, and I think Mick Garris directed the. It was his first film, I think, for the fourth one, which was essentially more of a TV movie anyway. But but
I had an interesting experience seeing Joker, where I thought, what if someone did a movie about Norman Bates that was like Joker, that was in the head of someone who sees the world almost like a Caligari, that sees this world in a distorted way, that has this relationship with his mother, whom he actually bathes, who has this vision of himself as he's going through the world that is completely at odds with how everyone else sees him. In other words, it would be interesting if a real artist wanted to do something with the character of Norman Bates and completely reimagined it, or reimagined it with a different murder situation, or imagined him in a completely different way. Who knows? I mean, as I said, I think the material will, there's a perennial quality to it. There will be more Hamlets. There will be, people have called Norman Bates the kind of the Hamlet of horror movies, but yes, there you have it. Someone could do a Caligari movie, but who has?
I wanted to ask you guys a question. Just a question about the movie. Do you think Hitchcock deliberately had Janet Leigh's bag too small to fit the money in? Because that always bothers me every time I see the film, especially when I was 8 years old. When she was pushing that money into the bag, I was thinking to myself, could you not push it down further? Do you know what I mean? Or why didn't she just put it somewhere else? And it really bothered me because it's money, right? And she's carrying it and it's sticking out.
Yeah.
And even when she's in the car and the policeman comes along, I keep thinking, you're going to see that money sticking out the bag. Do you reckon he did it deliberately?
I would say it was absolutely intentional, like every single thing that Hitchcock did. But that's just me. That's what I would say. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I can tell you that
I was going to say, you probably know.
It was a choice that he made with Rita Riggs, the costume person.
Yeah.
What he wanted to say was, well, first of all, he wanted to make, and you talked about this before, a great visual MacGuffin of the money. The money on the bed. Yes, she does something in the room. There's the money on the bed. In terms of the stuffing into the handbag, he wanted, once again, to bring the attention to the money. But he also wanted to tell the viewer, subliminally, this is not a thief. This is not someone who does this. This is not Marnie who brings a bag, the size of Mount Rushmore, but the size of the Valley or something, so that the money will go in there. This is Marion Crane is doing something impulsive and way out of her, way out of what she normally does. So it's it's just another way to tell the audience that she's not a thief. She's a circumstantial thief. She's a thief because she thinks it will buy her happiness with this man who doesn't really seem to care much about her anyway. So there it is. That, I mean.
But the envelope that the money was actually in really frustrates me when I was watching it yesterday.
Okay.
And it's like you could see the money in there. Why did she put it in a proper envelope? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it really frustrates me that it's like a letter envelope rather than a proper, proper when you stick things in an envelope. And you could see the money sticking out, and you see it on the bed, and it really does frustrate me. So I guess he did it deliberately to frustrate the audience. Yeah,
Hitch liked his MacGuffins, and that's the biggest one of all, really. So
he also what he used to call his icebox moments, which was give the audience something to talk and argue about. Well, why would she be so stupid as to put the No, I mean, I think he hooked you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
I'm only the man who knew too much because I talked to all the people who were there. But I remember everyone in my family. I come from a family that didn't have a lot of money. Everyone was obsessed with what happened to the money.
Yeah.
What a waste of the swamp. It's like, really? That's what you got from that movie? The money? It's like, it's like saying North by Northwest. Well, what happened to the microfilm? That was really that was really important. The future of the world depended on that microfilm.
I love how she's so inexperienced when she goes to buy the car, and she gives him the cash. And she's always thinking as well what other people are going to be saying. Did she get away with it and stuff like that? And it's just a terrific piece of writing. It really is, as far as I'm concerned. And am I right in saying that the guy that sold her the car was the guy that was in The Thing? Was that actor the same actor that was in The Thing? The guy that was tied to the chair. Because he looks a lot like him. I can't remember the name of the actor. He was in Logan's Run, the TV show.
His name is John Anderson.
You'll think of Donald Moffat, which is a different guy.
He looks a bit like him, though.
I see the resemblance, though.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of the actual writing, I just think that when I was younger, obviously I always wanted to see it for the for the action, if you like, for the shower scene, for the scares, for the Arbogast stair scene and all of that sort of stuff. But watching it now, I really, really enjoy the conversation that Marion and Norman have, with the sandwich in the back office. I just think that thematically is just, for both of them, heartbreaking. And I just think that what is great is they both make one another realize something in that scene. And I just think, wow. It's amazing.
Wow, indeed, from the standpoint of screenplay, from the standpoint of lighting, set design, and good Lord, from an acting viewpoint.
Yeah,
the two of them are at the peak of their form.
When you look at Psycho very carefully, it is a very, very, very well thought out movie. As Keith is saying, it's not about, when you're younger, it's about the shower scene, it's about the bit on the steps. But when you look at it as a grown up, as I said, I saw it yesterday, the complex of the characters that are suffering, they're all in their own cages and they can't get out and they're frustrated. And that's why she stole the money. And that's why she was attempting to do what she attempted. And then on top of that, Hitchcock put all the layers, like the policeman, the thoughts in her head, her making all these little mistakes, like seeing her boss walk across the road and stuff like that. He just piles it on. And then when you get to the shower scene, you just like wondering what's going on. You're just like, what? And it's such a great movie and it's such a great screenplay. The thing I love about this film, it's all very, very simple. It's not complicated at all. It's situations that are put in a box that are very, very simple, that you can understand. Another thing that I noticed about this film as well is if you turn the volume off, without the sound, you can still understand what's going on.
Yes.
And that is genius filmmaker.
Picture speaks 1,000 words and all that, but of course I like it with the sound on, just so we can have Bernard Herrmann's wonderful score as well.
Another thing I wanted to talk about, I love the beginning credits. The beginning credits
all
are
bad stuff,
isn't it? With the thing going across and then the words going like this, and the music was just so it puts you in the mood of this whole thing. And I love how it goes Phoenix, Arizona, and then the camera's floating. Obviously, you couldn't do it all in one take. These days, they can do it all in one take. You have to cut to the window, and we go through the window. Oh, one more thing before I sign off. I always, as a kid, I remember when I was watching it when I was 8, and you remember that scene where they're in the hotel room and he opens the window and he stands there. I'm thinking that window's huge. He could just fall out, because you remember that shot where the window's right there, and that's very dangerous, isn't it, to open the window that wide? He could just literally fall out. But yeah, sorry,
I'm absolutely loving to see the passion come out of you like this, Ian. So so I'm glad to have you on for that. Brilliant. So Stephen, I've got a question, and I think I know the answer to it, and I'm not sure if I heard this via your commentary. It's quite possibly where I'm picking it up from, but I have a lot of conversations with filmmakers about Hitchcock. Obviously, loads do, but many of them are really of this opinion that Alfred Hitchcock wasn't an actor's director. He already had it all planned out and edited and storyboarded, and actors were just there to move from A to B and say these lines. However, I'm sure I've got this from your commentary. I've heard a story that contradicts that says that Martin Balsam, who plays Arbogast in this, had some ideas about cutting Norman Bates off during the interrogation scene in the office at the front of the Bates Motel, and they decided Anthony Perkins, was quite nervous about this and wanted to run it past Hitch. And when they got him involved, he was completely open to the Martin Balsam's ideas and stuff. Are you able to expand on that? Am I on the wrong track here, or am I onto something?
No, you are onto something. It harkens back to something I said a little while ago, which is when Hitchcock trusted an actor, when he thought they were smart, when he thought they'd done their research. Like Janet Leigh, came to the set, and her script was covered with notes that she had written backstory about her character, and she ran all of them by Hitchcock. And she knew what record albums Marion would have listened to. She knew what her perfume was. She knew, she knew her salary. Also, Hitchcock gave her a lot of information about, what a secretary in Phoenix, Arizona at that time would be making in an office like that. But when actors as intelligent as Anthony Perkins and Martin Balsam, both New York theater trained actors, came to the set, they wanted to improvise. So he let them improvise, go off the script entirely. And he noticed their rhythms were so good. And so natural and tension kept rising between them. And there was physical tension in the way Martin Balsam, as an actor, would have a habit of standing very close to someone and getting in their space and messing with them.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock loved that because, and he actually did it too with John Gavin, where he wanted John Gavin to get very close to Anthony Perkins and make it almost like a seduction. And you see it in the movie; it's very palpable. And so when actors would come with good ideas, Hitchcock was very, very open to, or what he thought were good ideas. Where he always drew the line was where it was about ego, or how someone looked, or if shoot me from this side and not that side, or I don't like the color of my, whether it was a suit or or whatever. He resented that because these decisions had been thought out for months and months and months. They weren't arbitrary. They were all for a reason. A handbag is small because of this. You're wearing gray because you're a ghost coming out of the fog. He always knew what he was after, and he resented when people would mistrust all those decades of filmmaking. That somehow he didn't know what he was doing. I mean, if Kim Novak thought she should wear this color, then why shouldn't she? Or why shouldn't her hair be this color? Because, and he would get tired of it. So what would get reported was he would say, because I said so, or because it's in the script. What the people who have made Psycho, what Anthony Perkins told me, what Janet Leigh told me, on and on, was that we'd have these discussions of, if he thought that I'd fully reasoned it out, and it felt like a thread in the tapestry that he was trying to weave, that it wouldn't be discordant, and that it was, it was the music he heard in his head, and someone was singing the right chord or the wrong chord that made it perfect. He was absolutely open to it. What he was not open to was something arbitrary.
Yeah.
And so, look, I think there's a good reason that Cary Grant gives, for my money, his very best non-comedic performances in Hitchcock movies. I think there's very good reason to understand why Janet Leigh gives, for me, what's the best performance of her career, without a doubt.
Yeah.
She had the script to go with it. She had the director who knew how she should move, when she should move, and Janet was intelligent enough to know, oh, I'm in the hands of something special here. So don't buck that. Don't try to to swim against that tide. So I think I don't think he was he a Kazan? Was he who?
Oh, is he gone?
Stephen, you've frozen on us.
Oh,
he's back. You're back.
He's back.
It's all right.
Yeah. My thought froze too. So
yeah.
So I don't think he was. Let's say I don't think he was a Kazan, where there was lots of talk about motivation and all of that. He was making sexy, romantic, dangerous thrillers.
He was, he was.
And there, it was all laid out for someone. And I remember one actor. I don't need to mention her name, but the point is that she was never photographed better. She was never given scripts anywhere near that good, and she excelled because there was all that protection for one. I mean, look, if I were going to be dressed by Edith Head, and I were going to be given makeup by Westmore, the best people in the business, and I had lines for me by Samuel Taylor or Ernest Lehman or Joe Stefano, like in Psycho, or Ben Hecht in Notorious. I mean, you'd have to be kind of a fool to. I mean, really, think about that.
That's true.
When you've got multiple Oscar winners around you who have created, who are all coming together to help create this universe, and you're part of the fabric of that, then why pull the thread? I mean, I'm not an actor, so and I. I don't want to disrespect other actors and their their process and all of that. He may not have been the most cerebral and the most emotional of people, but I think his instincts and his know-how were second to none. It's funny how people bring this up about Hitchcock, but they never bring it up about Howard Hawks.
Yeah.
And who had no discussions. He was basically like, F you, just go do it. A miserable human being. No, and a great picture maker. Did they ever say, well, John Ford? Did they ever say back in the day, well, John Ford wasn't really an actor's director? I mean, I think there's a lot of resentment toward Hitchcock. Like there was resentment toward Fred Astaire. People who make things look too easy they're always second guessed.
Hitchcock was born to do what he did. Absolutely. I mean, look how many hit films he had. And I understand when actors want to question directors, because I've been there and Keith has been there. We understand that completely. But if an actor doesn't trust the director, why are they there?
You in the medium of film, particularly, as an actor, you are 100% basically in the hands of the director, because all you can do as an actor is bring truth to it and give the performance and know your lines and know where to hit marks and all this sort of thing, because outside of that, it's how you're going to be framed, how you're going to be lit, how your performance is going to be altered in the edit if it's even going to make the cut. Yeah.
Oh,
So there's so much you just got to trust in the material.
I couldn't agree with both of you more. I remember as you're talking, I remember flying to New York with Janet Leigh to do a live TV show, and she said to me, you know, when you're an actor, once you've trusted the script, the thing that you do is you trust and make friends with the director, make friends with the editor, make friends with the cameraman, and my favorite part, and just be a decent person.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before or since from any other actor. Just be a decent person. And, you know, and she was lovely. And so for Janet Leigh, I can tell you this, and people don't like to hear this, but it's absolutely true. The first 2 weeks, Hitchcock was not happy with Janet Leigh. He said, I've made a mistake. She's not up to this. And I mean, what he really said was she's famous for her breasts. And then he backed down because he said, I'm going to start shooting reaction shots of Janet where she's not saying anything. And then he saw what she was bringing and what she was filling in. And he said, I've got her wrong. And which I think was wonderful. I've got her wrong.
The fact
now I know how to direct her. Now I know how to direct her. So that to me is an actor's director. It's like, okay, I've miscalculated. I've misunderstood her. It was really when she showed, because she brought it, she was reading, you know, doing her lines and brushing up on her lines, and she brought her script. And when he saw her script and read some of her notes, you know, she had tried some of the ideas out, but when he saw how detailed she was and how serious she was about this and how she really wanted not to be perceived anymore as that, you know, beautiful, large-breasted, sunny, charming woman who's very famous for being married to an equally famous actor. He saw, okay, she is the real deal, and it changed everything for her.
But you can see he can see he's an actor's director. I mean, all the stuff that the actors did in this film, that must have come from Hitchcock. You know, everything from the bit where she's trying to hide the money in the bag and she puts it in a newspaper, Lord knows why. You know, and then she puts it atop the counter. This money in the newspaper.
This money thing really bothers you, doesn't it?
Frustrated me to hell. I'm like, why did you put it there? Just put it in
Sounds
the
like
bag.
a personal issue, but all right. No, I think that's really interesting that you.
I'm assuming now he did that deliberately to actually frustrate me or the audience that was watching the film.
Just you.
Yeah, but there's that scene. I get what you're saying as well, Stephen. There's that scene in it where she says nothing in that scene, does she? She puts a suitcase on the bed, she opens it, and then she takes the money out. She wonders where to put it, and then she goes around the room, and then she finally settles on putting it in a newspaper, doesn't she? She put it in a newspaper, and she puts it in a stupid place on top of the counter instead of in the drawer, whatever, you know. And that was all done with no dialogue, and
and was very specific.
And
definitely very specific.
She gets in the car, and an entire driving sequence where it's all on her face.
Yes.
And so Hitchcock is off camera, you know, deviling her, saying, you know, there's your boss. He's, you know, he's after you. And so he was acting with her. But that's the Oscar nomination right there.
Yeah.
All that silent stuff. And then it's signed, sealed, and delivered when she has the scene in the parlor with Norman.
Yes.
That's the thing legends are made of.
Yeah. I love the way in Hitchcock where they actually recreate that with Scarlett Johansson in the doing the driving and everything. But you mentioned about, you know, the everything being very deliberate, right down to the costumes, etc. One of the things I will say about this 4K release that we've got is the fact that you can literally pick out the thread in the costumes and see that. I've never before, I mean, I've owned this film on, you know, I saw it on TV originally. I've owned it on VHS. I've owned it on, you know, DVD, Blu-ray, etc. But the 4K really does, it is incredible what they've done with this transfer. It really brings it to life.
It's true to say that we are watching Psycho now better than they watched it in the cinema. The quality that we're watching is far better than anything that was projected via projector in the cinema. And we're seeing it in a different light. I'm pretty sure that if Hitchcock was alive today, he'd revel in watching this movie the way we see it now, you know. So yeah,
I'm sure. Well, also we're seeing from a censored point of view as well, we're seeing his version here because it's literally about 3 or 4 seconds, but there are they linger on a few things longer, you know, the voyeuristic scene where Marion's removing her bra, they do hang on that slightly longer. Also after he's done the shower scene, the blood on his hands, they hover on that a lot longer, and there's more stabs in the Arbogast scene. So it's very minimal, but it's essentially what Hitchcock originally took before the censors decided to remove a few things.
Sorry. Also, did you find it weird that when Arbogast got stabbed and he fell down the stairs, she stabs him twice and then you hear him scream? She stabs him like this and she puts the knife up and he goes, "Wah!" And then she stabs him again. Do you find it weird that he never screamed before the first stab or the second stab? But yet,
well, I know why it was done. Whether or not you want to accept that, it was Hitchcock's deliberate intention to suggest that the man was in shock, and that as you know, as who expects a man in a dress to come out of the room and with a knife,
especially in 1960.
Well, I'm talking about the reality of the movie, like a tough investigator thinking he was just looking for maybe an old woman, but it's not an old woman, it's a murderer, and he's at the top of a staircase, and so the idea was the falling was shock, that the feet are just touching and he's trying to gain some kind of access to a railing or something, but he can't. So it's a really, but Hitchcock made these choices, and he it's what makes him Hitchcock, though. Someone else would have done that deliberately and maybe more realistically, but the movie wouldn't have the resonance that this does, or the mystery of
I copied that scene. I copied that scene where he gets slashed in the face. I directed a film called Fallen Angels, which was a horror movie, and it was crap. I didn't write the script; it was a crap script. But there's a scene in it where this guy comes out with a knife and he just misses the guy, and he slashes him in the face, and that was my Psycho scene. It was my tribute to the detective, to private detective getting slashed in the face, and I literally copied that scene in the film. So,
well, actually, you do have a connection directly to Psycho, in so much as was that the film of yours that Jeff Fahey was in?
Yes, Jeff Fahey.
Yeah, and of course, Jeff Fahey was in, like it or not, he was in Psycho 3, right?
Yes.
So there you go.
I thought Jeff Fahey was very good in that movie.
Well, he's a good actor. Jeff
he's
a really good actor. Yeah, really nice guy as well.
Yeah.
It's. I remember the first time I saw Psycho. I don't know. I don't know why I would think this, but I felt like I had never seen images so clearly, and I'd never heard sound so crisp in a movie theater. And I don't know. There you go.
I love that saying.
I like you, Eastman.
Yes.
I think
awesome.
I think I think it was that maybe the movie was so impactful to me that I was hyping the visuals and the sound. But I'm sure you're quite right that in 1960 or the re-releases that I saw, that it ever sounded or looked that way. The question of whether Hitchcock would have liked it that way is hard to say. Maybe this movie, yes, but don't forget he was a great proponent of glamour and. Hello. I wave. I don't know.
We've got to wave to the ones supporting us for sure.
But I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, what another thing that struck me with the film is it true to say that it was the first movie to show a toilet?
Yes.
To show the toilet roll. Yeah.
Not only a
sure.
toilet, but the
And
first
also, was it
flushing.
famous? Yeah, exactly. First flushing. And was it famous for if you didn't turn up in time to see the movie, you weren't allowed in the cinema? Was that true as well?
There were other movies that had done it before, but
right.
I think it was the first time that they really amped up the gimmick by having Pinkerton guards or fake people, men in those days, dressed in uniform. I remember at the theater where I saw it, there was, I knew who it was, but there was a guard at the door, but you could not buy tickets once. Well, you could buy tickets, but you couldn't go into the theater once thing was over. But
film had started,
that goes back. That kind of ballyhoo and exploitation goes way back. I mean, Diabolique, when it was released in the United States, a big influence on Hitchcock and Psycho.
Oh yeah.
When Diabolique or Les Diaboliques was released in the United States, there was a don't tell the ending and you can't go in. But it wasn't. I mean, you could go in any time you felt like.
It was a pre-spoiler alert that we'd have today. Yeah.
It's interesting that most people wouldn't think of going into a theater once the movie is started today, or in these days with theater at all. But
they wouldn't let you in.
My dad worked in a factory, and he would work odd shifts sometimes, and he would he'd tell me things that I think of all the time, which is in New York and the big cities, movies would play all night. They would never stop. The theaters wouldn't close because people came off shift, and they would go to theaters when they couldn't sleep, or when they would sleep in the theater, or they needed someplace to be until they started their next shift. And so people were very accustomed to dropping into a movie when it suited them, when they finished dinner, or when it was right for them. But with Psycho, it changed the way people went to the movies.
Yeah. We just want the theaters to open again now. That would be nice.
I'm sure we all do. I miss it so badly.
Yeah.
I wanted to see Tenet in a movie theater. I want to see.
We saw it in a movie theater.
Yeah, we did. We did go. Yeah. But I'm missing. It's normally the BAFTA voting season this time of year, so I'm normally watching movies in a theater with a Q&A every evening, and I am missing that so badly. I mean, we're having a few of them via Zoom, but it's not quite the same,
No, it's all the same. Just like this isn't the same as being in a room together. But I'm grateful at least that there are these opportunities where we can have conversations about very old movies that still have tremendous impact and relevance for today.
That is very true.
I remember running into Mike Nichols, the director, great stage director and certainly film director, and he told me that he learned about cutting and he learned about direction from watching Psycho again and again, and everything he needed to know was there. It's obviously Mike Nichols is no longer with us, but I think it speaks to what you were saying earlier about how it's a movie that bears watching and rewatching however you want to. If you want something to watch for Halloween that's fun and hair-raising, or unsettling, or you want to study it as a work of art. It's always been my contention, fairly or unfairly, that Hitchcock should never have left Paramount. I think at Paramount he was given the best budgets, the best, the access to the best technicians, and all of that. It got very different when he got to Universal, where it really became about his being a big investor in Universal and a big stockholder,
because he literally worked with all the studios, didn't he, over his years?
Most of them, yes. Most of the big studios, he did. But he was, he did stuff at RKO, and he did. But to me, the pinnacle is Paramount, where he's got access to good properties and great screenwriters and great production values on To Catch a Thief or Rear Window or The Trouble with Terror Hereditary or Vertigo, and on and on. I knew too much.
Yeah, but the thing is, you get the impression that Hitchcock wanted to keep evolving. He didn't want to stay in one place. He, as a creator, and I feel this too of myself. I don't want to keep making the same thing all the time. You wanted to try something new, and you wouldn't be allowed to try something new as well. If he stayed in that studio system, or he stayed wherever he was, they probably would expect the same from him time and time again. And Hitchcock's a creative person, so I think it was the right move for him to make to try and, you know.
Yeah, well, originally it was to get away from David Selznick, wasn't it? Who he did the films with them, and obviously that was quite a tumultuous relationship, you know, with his producer. But this obviously, I've got to mention this as I'm home Media Minefield. But this always makes buying any Hitchcock collection on home media is always difficult, because they're all under different studios and different rights, so you can never get that sort of definitive collection that has everything. You have to buy different box sets and stuff. But anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. But I mean, the thing is about his influence to directors, right from, you know, Mike Nichols, who is a wonderful director, as you said, Stephen, but also you mentioned Ian, you know, Spielberg as well, who's no doubt, you know, it was him and David Lean that were the two, you know, influences for Spielberg. He always said, you know, it was always Hitchcock and David Lean. But you look at other directors as well, and what I think was always an interesting experiment that didn't work was when you look at Gus Van Sant, who was obviously quite a good filmmaker in his own right, but when he had enough success to be able to go and try and remake this film shot for shot, but it so doesn't work. And I always think that that's you know, interesting. And when I used to teach, I was teaching, you know, 16 to 18-year-olds, and I always did as a bit of an experiment and a bit self-indulgent as well, is I would play Hitchcock's Psycho to them at the beginning of the semester, and we'd discuss it and study it, and, you know, I'd use excerpts of your work, actually, Stephen. So I hope you don't mind, but for education, it's fine, right? And you know, we'd go through it, and then at the end of the term, I'd play the Gus Van Sant one just to see what the kids thought. You know, what young people that didn't grow up, you know, that, and it's quite funny, because I always found that the class were 50-50. Some of them actually preferred the remake because it was in color, and just because it was more contemporary, and I always said, right, you're the guys that fell this course. No, I didn't. But, you know, no, but I just found that interesting, and I think, you know, as we're talking about the Psycho legacy and obviously celebrating the 60 years, we'd be remiss not to actually mention the remake, and
do you know, another thing that I've realized about movies of yesteryear and today is that movies, especially Psycho is not boring. Not 1 minute of it is boring, but it takes its time with the characters. It does things that today's films don't consider important. Like that, for instance, when he finishes looking at her through the hole in the wall, he basically comes out of the cabin thing, and he walks to his house, and he gets to the steps, and he looks up at the steps, and then he thinks for a moment. Then he walks to the kitchen, and he had that scene where he's sitting at the table in that wonderful frame shot where it was just that slit, and he's sitting there at the kitchen and stuff like that. All that's character building. All that's telling you what Norman, what's in Norman's mind. And today's films don't do that. They'd rather give it to you, throw it in your lap, you know, an obvious thing. You know.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, he's also misdirecting you. He's also you know, not alerting you to the fact that someone's going to change outfits in a moment or two. So yeah, because he's busy. One of the production sketches that I donated to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is that exact shot. It was sketched, the shot being Bates at the dining room table with that slit in the Victorian bric-a-brac around him. It's a stunning shot, completely thought out, well ahead of time. And again, you know, for me, it harkens back to the comment about the actor's director. There it is. I mean, there's the director giving the actor a chance to inhabit the space, to suggest to the audience thought processes, emotions, conflicts, just by not having them chatter, moving in space.
Sorry, it's very much a TV thing. So I've noticed that about Spielberg's early work. He would do that too. He would have things where somebody wouldn't say any, that the dialogue would be sparse, and it'd be all done in a movement of the camera or a shot that's framed in such a way that would subconsciously put into the audience what he's trying to tell them. He's always one step ahead, and Hitchcock's always one step ahead of the audience. So with that particular scene that you were talking about, obviously it was well thought of. And as I say, you don't get that kind of stuff in movies today at all. It's just
I think what I find interesting as a study point about the remake is, you know, they use essentially the same lenses, the same camera moves, the same edit points, the same music cues, you know, all of that stuff. And apart from it being in color instead of black and white, but I think that the real reason that film doesn't work as well is because of and this is not to criticize those actors, but just the actors that he used just weren't right for the roles. And I just think you can't remake a work of art in that way. And to be fair to Gus Van Sant, he admits it himself. You know, he said it was an experiment that didn't work. But I just find it fascinating that all of those elements in film, you know, just have to work in unison, or you've got nothing.
Yeah.
Well, you also have a cast. You need a cast that isn't commenting on the material, that isn't doing it as a museum piece, or isn't this quaint. And I caught a number of actors, at least I felt, commenting on the material and literally commenting on the material as they did interviews, where one actor said, well, it's a much better movie than the original because Hitchcock was a punk and didn't trust actors. That's just rubbish.
The thing is, you've got an inconsistency as well, because you've got actors like James Remar and William H. Macy that are essentially doing their performances absolutely spot on the same. They're almost doing an impression of, you know, Balsam from the original. But then you've got, you know, Viggo Mortensen completely and Julianne Moore. They completely make those characters their own thing and do it very differently. So not only have you got that, you've got a sort of inconsistency across the piece. And even though I don't think it's a good film, obviously, I do from a study point of view find it very interesting. I do think, hence why I taught it when I used to teach, as I just think it's a very it's a very intriguing concept that, you know, one could argue the money should have never been put into it and it should never have been made. But the fact that it was, and the fact that even though everything was done identical, it didn't work. And I find that, you know, fascinating.
What I find fascinating is that I gave money to this project and didn't realize it wouldn't work. I would have, everybody would have known that wouldn't work. Why did they do it? Because they can. That's the thing. So, and that's not a good reason to make a movie.
Oh, definitely not. No,
well,
definitely not.
One reason was because young people won't watch the old movie in color because it's not in color. And, you know, it can be something like that. But you need to have actors who are intensely charismatic.
Yeah.
and who have a resonance.
But also,
hey,
Hitchcock
it could have been worse. They could have gone and tried to colorize it like they did It's a Wonderful Life, which drives me, because that's another one of my favorite films, and the fact that there's a colorized version just hurts me to my soul, you know.
Hitchcock realized that sex sells as well, hence why he had so many good looking blondes in his movie. And that's the thing with the remake of Psycho. What's the girl's name again?
Anne Heche is no Janet Leigh.
That's what I'm saying. So that's the thing. And,
but
I'm sure she's a nice person, but no way is she as attractive as Janet Leigh. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. And that to me, I remember watching the remake and thinking, why am I here? Because I saw it in the cinema, and I was just thinking, she's not good looking at all. I don't understand. But with even Janet Leigh, she's gorgeous, isn't she? So
yes, and one thing that you do get with Janet Leigh that's vital is passion and warmth.
Yes,
and sadness. All of those things are in play. I mean, when she says a line that could seem ridiculous, and in some cases gets laughed at, "I'll lick the stamps." She gives it such force and such sadness, such desperation that it's hard not to feel for her. I didn't feel. I'm not the touchy-feely type, but I mean, I need to care about someone in a movie, or at least I need to feel that it matters to them. The thing that they're talking about deeply matters to them, even if it doesn't to me. I need commitment, and I didn't feel that. But Gus Van Sant was very nice to me. He invited me to the set. We talked about it quite a lot, but even then, and I like him very much, and I've loved some of his movies, but even then I could see he was at sea. He had kind of an art student approach to what this would be, almost a meta quality that he thought he could, a Warhol kind of quality that he thought he could bring to it. And I thought, you're not experiencing Psycho from the inside.
Or the other amusing thing that I found with many of my students, and of course it's because they're looking at it so many years later, but obviously this was a very early film in Vince Vaughn's career. Okay, but students watching it now, or I say now, in the last few years when I was doing this, what they always found was they couldn't take it seriously because they were used to Vince Vaughn being the comedy guy, and it's like, well, yes, his career went in quite a different path following that to what it had been prior to that, and that was interesting, the sort of baggage that actors bring with them.
With him, he's like 6 foot something, and he's built like this, and you don't feel like he's vulnerable. When he was, they copied the scene where they're talking and stuff like that. But when you look at Anthony Perkins, he's very vulnerable, isn't he? He's very innocent. He comes across as innocent and vulnerable. And when she says something, he gets a bit shy. And then when they talk about the mother, he gets really angry. And you have that wonderful shot with the birds behind him when he's getting pissed off and stuff like that. With the remake, this guy's 6 foot and he looks like he can bloody crush a tank. And you just can't take it seriously. You're just sitting there going, why? Why did they cast him? He doesn't. He
also made Swingers. I mean, he went to Vegas. He'd already done that movie, so that's sort of he's more of a Dean Martin kind of guy than an Anthony Perkins kind of guy. And so,
exactly.
I do know that Gus Van Sant asked Matt Damon to do the movie, and he also asked Ben Affleck if he wanted to do the movie because they had a nice relationship. But to me, it's an anomaly, but I don't dismiss it. I think it's a fascinating failure. And I think if the artist doesn't get a chance to try and attempt and, shoot for the moon, then...
the thing is, though, if you are going to make a remake, you've got to be very clever about it. You've got to try and take it in another direction like they did with The Fly. Right. You know what I mean?
Well, exactly.
So, you've got to take it in another direction.
that was a complete reimagining, and that's the difference between sort of remake and reimaginings. And I've never quite seen the point of a shot for shot remake. It just seems like you're using the wrong blueprint for the film. It should be the script, not the previous film. It's kind of like, that doesn't make any sense, but there you go.
Agree more. It's interesting, the numbers of very contemporary directors like Guillermo del Toro and David Fincher, and you can see Hitchcock in their work. You can see why they get them, why they love them, but they're not. I don't feel with them that they're imitating or that they're making an homage. It feels to me like Hitchcock is in their bloodstream, and it comes out in a very organic kind of way, as opposed to something that's larded on. So let's do a shot from above of a man or woman, standing below, because Hitchcock did that.
Well, I've always said this about directing, that today you got someone like Michael Bay, and he used 9 cameras and 1 shot, and he's got the cameras moving all the time. But if you look back at the 70s and the 60s, when they did a camera movement, they did it for a reason, to express a mood or express a point. But today they just think it's really cool to move the camera or have a tracking shot for no apparent reason.
Shoot the shit out of it. No, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I want to ask you, Stephen, because I'm interested in this, is one of my other directors that when I was growing up and looking into, getting into filmmaking, and before I went to film school and was interested in becoming a filmmaker and all this, I enjoyed Brian De Palma films, but Brian De Palma obviously gets a lot of stick for being the guy that rips off Hitchcock, and I always think of it as it's more of a homage than there are some things that I suppose are blatant rip-offs. But I just wondered, do you have an opinion on Brian De Palma? What are your thoughts on that?
I like Brian De Palma best when he's drunk on movie making. Or stoned on movie making. You can tell he's someone who, at his best, is just insane in a way that I get excited by. Like Scorsese is insane when he's at his best. This is someone he's sort of inculcated the entire history of cinema, and it comes spewing out of him. It's like, in a musical when people sing because there's no other way to express the emotion. It's to me, when Brian De Palma or any of them are at their best is when it just feels like they're just drunk on cinema, and that the images just keep flowing, and the operatic nature of it just comes out of them. I'm less interested when it's Dressed to Kill, which is a movie that I used to love, and then I saw it recently and I went, what was it? It's too much Hitchcock. No, I love Angie Dickinson. I love Angie Dickinson in it.
I love Angie. I always think that imitating someone you admire is the best way to learn. And if you look at Brian De Palma's work, his first stuff, he imitates Hitchcock a lot. But then when you get something like Untouchables, he's definitely Brian De Palma. He is not copying Spielberg. Yes, he becomes it's the only way to learn. He becomes his own person. The only way to learn is to imitate, and then you'll get to a point where you become your own man, and you use everything that you've learned from the past to create something new and mix that with who you are. And that's what Brian De Palma was doing. So I don't blame him.
Yeah, he did rip off other directors in that film, but that's a whole nother thing. It's more obscure.
But still, you're talking about the step scene. I know you are. But still, though, it's still Brian De Palma at his best.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
Absolutely.
When was the last Brian De Palma movie that you signed on 100% to?
Scarface was.
Which was way back. Yeah,
brilliant.
Okay.
And I love the Untouchables. I love it because of so many different reasons. Sean Connery, Robert De Niro, Kevin Costner, the costumes. I love, you know, the whole over the top drama of it all, you know, the over the top shooting, the over the top violence. I just love that film. The beginning sequence again with Psycho, with the lines going across the thing. With the Untouchables, the same, has the word that goes Untouchables and just keeps going, and the music and everything about that film I love, you know, and that is Brian De Palma at his best, you know.
Well, there's also a screenwriter there.
Yeah.
David Mamet.
And screenwriter.
It's something, you know, it's something to build on. Yeah. I just think that you know, visually, the operatic, truly obsessed directors are really well served when there's a good screenplay to, you know, undergird all that, you know, all that hysteria, that beautiful hysteria. What did I say?
Yeah. I think somebody came in his room.
Sorry. I hope my pizzas.
Hey, Ian, I've got to ask, was it Mother?
No, it was. Yeah, it was Mother.
So,
Mother Jones pizza.
So, you know, I think hopefully we've done quite a good job here of celebrating Psycho. What I would like to do before we, you know, bring things to a close in the next sort of 15 minutes or whatever is, Stephen, please tell us about some of your other work. Tell us about what you're working on now and what you've got coming up. And Ian, obviously, I'll ask you the same thing as well. But Stephen, please use this as a platform.
Well, thank you. I can't say a lot about certain things, but I had a book that came out this summer that's now in its second, going into a third printing after the first of the year, and it's a look at a very different kind of movie, Valley of the Dolls, which I wanted to write about because it came at you know, for me at least, such an interesting sort of intersection of old Hollywood and new Hollywood in the 1960s, and I was really interested in writing about the clash between David O. Selznick. I'm stuck with Hitchcock here.
Yes.
With Daryl Zanuck and his son Richard, and you know, how it impacted upon that movie, and how that movie you know, was considered such a terrible disaster on every level, and yet it was the most successful movie of the year. And you know, it's very much in the, I did it as seriously as I was studying Psycho, but this time the writing is very tongue-in-cheek because that's who I am, and that's what I felt the subject required. And there's been, since the publication, lots and lots of meetings and talk about it being turned into a limited series, 6 to 8 episodes, or a television series lasting more than 1 year. And all of those things are being discussed now. In terms of writing,
well, that's exciting. First of all, that's very exciting. And
people who are interested in stepping up to it, as were when Alfred Hitchcock in the Making of Psycho as a book was being courted for the movies. I won't drop names, but it's the 2020 equivalent of those major names who are interested in either being in front of the camera or behind the camera or working on set design, because this, if we do it, and if we do it right, this will be a wallow in 1960s style. And,
fabulous.
That you've not seen before, even on Mad Men or The Queen or anything. In terms of writing, I'm writing for the first time. I'm writing fiction for publication.
Wow!
It is a Hitchcock is involved. That's really all I can say. But it is. Imagine this. When I was a little boy, believe it or not, I actually, when I saw Psycho, I left the theater thinking, well, they went into that window of that hotel, but what if they'd gone slightly to the right or below or to the left? What were those stories? And so that kind of thing has been nagging at me for a while. So I've started work on it and already talked with the publisher about it. And I'm really excited because it's something I should have been doing for a very long time. And so it feels a little like my Psycho. It feels like I'm breaking new ground. I don't mean that. I mean that modestly. I'm not saying it's going to have any of that impact. All I'm saying is it's very different from what I've done, and yet feels very much in sync with what I have been thinking for a long time, feeling for a long time, and should be doing. So the series is the thing, the book is the thing. I already have a new idea for a next sort of making of, but this one would be entirely different, not just in terms of subject, but in terms of the way I tackle it. It will almost be like a novel as opposed to reportage, but it will all be, all the facts will be there.
Right.
Cool.
When you get living people who can tell you the story of what it was like to be on that set. See, that to me is the very best kind of research you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God,
yeah. Well,
it happened to me on this day, and this is what I was feeling, and this is what was going on in my marriage, and this is how the movie affected me. To me, that's gold.
Yeah.
So
well, this is all quite inspiring, and I will also say for viewers out there, I can't recommend enough, particularly for inspiring filmmakers, your audio commentary that you do over Psycho. I know you recorded it a few years back, because I first heard it on the DVD in like '97 or whatever. So I know it's an older commentary, but everything on it is relevant, and I think anybody remotely interested in this film and interested in filmmaking should absolutely invest their time into listening to that. So so that's my little endorsement for you there. Whatever that's worth.
It's worth a lot.
So and how about you, Ian? What's the Mega Geek got in store moving forward?
Well, you can't do anything because of the bear bug. So but I put up a film that I shot 10 years ago, which is Bad Day. I did a web series before all of this bear bug thing started called Rebecca Gold, so you can go and check that out. It's only 5 episodes. And I just put up the making of Bad Day, which, as I said, was a film shot 10 years ago. I just put that up. That was really hard because everything was shot on DV at the time. Behind the scenes were shot on DV, so I had to go through this AI program to actually make it look better. So it looks better.
It's amazing. That AI stuff is incredible. Yeah. If somebody had told me you could take, standard definition videotape and make it work on high definition Blu-ray or whatever, I'd have said, just a few years back, I'd have said, you're crazy. That's impossible. Yet we have algorithms that do that now. It's amazing.
So that's the only things that mean, check out my channel. It's called the Rebecca Gold channel, and just check it out, and it's got lots of stuff to watch. And this man over here is in the film. Well done. He's in Bad Day. Hey. So there you go.
I know what I'll be doing this weekend.
It wasn't great. that wasn't a loaded question at all. But one of the things I do want to say as well before we sort of wrap this up, and I give the sort of finals as to where you can find work, etc., is only because we've mentioned it a few times, and it is sort of relevant. We've been talking about Hitchcock. I think the film Marnie was brought up at one point.
Yeah.
We were talking about The Untouchables, which was incredible. And on this day, this Halloween day, we all received some incredibly sad news about Sean Connery passing today. And he was aged 90. He's definitely been an influence in my life. I'm a massive James Bond fan, but not just that, all of his other work. And I would like for this second episode of Home Media Minefield Live to be dedicated to the memory of one of our acting greats, Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Have you got any words? I mean, Stephen, did you ever come across Sean in your work?
No, I never did. Only in research and in how much Hitchcock adored him, and he was probably his favorite leading man after Cary Grant. Believe it or not.
Wow.
He wanted to do very specific projects with him, and wanted to put him under contract. And though Mr. Connery really seemed to like him very much and liked working with him. He chafed under the 007 contract to begin with, and he just didn't want to, pin himself down to, to another contract. But I think he was stunning to look at, a real formidable movie presence and a real movie star, and we're so starved for actors.
Tell us about it.
That kind of charisma and gravitas and just sheer talent. You couldn't tear your eyes from him. He was the real deal, and I'm very sad that he's gone. It seems to me he lived a wonderful life, and I'm just happy that we have so many extraordinary performances from him over the years.
Yeah.
And I do regret that he and Hitchcock didn't work again, because I think they could have done something special and different and exciting. He certainly had a brilliant career.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, listen, I don't mean to end it on a somber note, because this is Halloween, and we're supposed to, this is obviously celebrating 60 years of Psycho, but I just thought that I didn't want this to end without at least mentioning that today.
Yeah.
So that just really leaves me to thank not only both of you, but of course I'd like to thank the people that contributed on the live stream. I think we did suffer a little bit with numbers because of what's going on in the world at the moment in terms of announcements, etc. But the good news is people will hopefully find this in retrospect and get to look at it, because it is recorded. If you do watch this and like what you're seeing, then please do like, subscribe, comment, consider subscribing to the channel, etc. This is only the second live stream we've done. The channel predominantly looks at home media, physical media releases on DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, etc. And I tend to do reviews and unboxings on that. If you want to see any of my other work, I do work as an actor and a filmmaker as well. So you can see my films at British Isles, that's EYLES, as in my last name, on YouTube. Ian's already mentioned his work on YouTube. Stephen, I will make sure that I put links in the show notes to where people can access your website, and I'll also put links to your wonderful books in there as well. So if anybody wants to get a copy of that, they can do so.
Thank you. It was an honor. It was an honor and a lot of fun to do this. And why the hell didn't you ask me for the first episode?
Well, the first episode, we actually we celebrated 40 years of Flash Gordon. The Mike Hodges movie. So please go and check that out, anybody who's listening to that. Unfortunately for that one, I had a few technical problems, as it was literally the first episode that I'd done. This one, apart from me spilling water over my script right at the beginning and not doing the best the most concise intro, but other than that, it seemed to go quite smoothly.
Yeah, very smooth.
And I've really enjoyed myself. I love talking about movies. I particularly love talking about Psycho, and Stephen, and I always like talking with the Mega Geek, obviously, but Stephen, for me, this has been a bit of an honor, because, before I even knew that this would happen, I've read your work and I've listened to your work as a film student. So it's been a great honor to have you on, and I'm glad it all happened on Halloween. It seems sort of fitting.
Everything you said was fascinating, Stephen. Fascinating,
Right back at you. So stay safe, stay well, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No worries.
Be safe out there, everyone, and happy Halloween. And we'll see you at the next Home Media Minefield Live. Good night.
Ta-da.
Bye-bye. Let's wave to the camera, guys. We're waving to the people watching. Goodbye. Bye.
It's really hard to find out when we're going to get cut off.
Yeah.
So I'm waving.
I have hit end broadcast, but it's not ending.
You never know. So